Good evening and welcome to NAHT Northern Ireland's special COVID-19 briefing. My name's Laura Flynn and I'll be your facilitator this evening. I'm a regional organiser for NAHT. We are delighted to welcome so many people joining us tonight. Over 500 people have registered to attend. Particular welcome to NAHT members, but also non-members of NAHT, members of our sister trade unions and parents, governors and other interested parties. We are delighted that you have joined us here tonight. We've got a great panel this evening and we will be very pleased for you to hear from them. We've got, first of all, we're going to be hearing from Paul Whiteman, General Secretary of NAHT. We're also very pleased to welcome Geri Cameron, who is President of NAHT NI and is also a Principal at a special school in Belfast. We have Graham Gault, who is Vice President of NAHT NI and he's a Principal of a primary school in County Armagh, and he will be taking over from Geri as President of NAHT NI in the summer. We have Helena Macormac, who is Director of NAHT NI, and we will be joined shortly by the Minister for Education, Peter Weir. So I'll just start off with letting you know that we're wanting to make this broadcast as interactive as possible. Please do use the chat room function. My colleague Harry Greer is there. He will be helping you with any technical supports and he will also be providing you with links throughout the evening that we will be referencing. So please do say hello, let us know where you're from. But if you would like to ask a question, we please ask you not to do that in the chat function, but to do it via the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of the screen. And before you submit a question, we ask you to look at what questions have already been submitted. And if there is the same question or if there is a similar question, then we ask you to, rather than ask the same question again, is to vote for that one by clicking the thumbs up button, because we will take questions in order of popularity. We will also be addressing questions to the Minister that have come in advance, so thank you to those of you who have submitted questions in advance. And again, we've chosen the questions that have been the most frequent, the most popular submitted by people. So we have almost 500 people joining us this evening. Just to give you a bit of a run through of the evening. We'll first of all be hearing from General Secretary of NAHT across the UK, Paul Whiteman, who will say a few words. Then we'll go to Helena Macormac, Director of NAHT NI. Then we'll be hearing from the Minister. He will give a short address to members and then we'll take some questions. And then we'll have a response to the Minister from Geri Cameron, President of NAHT NI, and Graham Gault, our Vice President in NAHT NI, will close the meeting. There will be a replay of this meeting tomorrow. You will be able to watch it on the NAHT website. And we will tweet the link from @NAHT NI News. And speaking of Twitter, if you would like to tweet around tonight, use the hashtag #NICOVIDSchoolResponse. That's #NICOVIDSchoolResponse. And tweet @NAHT NI News. And we are delighted to welcome, first of all, NAHT General Secretary Paul Whiteman. Thank you, Paul. I'll give you the floor now.
Hi, thanks Laura, and good evening everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be taking part in this broadcast. We've been doing broadcasts right across the NAHT throughout this crisis, and I'm very pleased that we're doing one for Northern Ireland, members in Northern Ireland right now, and it's a very special and much needed event right now as we begin to get towards the end of this academic year and begin to think about the academic year in front of us. And I just wanted to bring a message of support and recognition for what it is you do, really, before we get into the detail that will follow. The undoubted and deep reserves of innovation and resilience that you have as school leaders have been really called upon in the last short while, or 12 weeks or so, since the crisis really began to take hold. And I think your communities, your parents and your students and pupils should be very proud of what it is you've done for them and to support them going forward. You've had to rebuild education from the floor up in a very, very short space of time, and you're going to be engaged in doing that for some time in the future as we begin to understand how the virus will be controlled and how education can take place in those circumstances. So what is it that NAHT should be doing for education and for NAHT members? our job is quite simple to describe. It's quite difficult to achieve, but simple to describe. Quite frankly, the success of education and the support that's delivered, the quality of support that's delivered to pupils and the communities that you serve doesn't sit on the shoulders of the Assembly, doesn't sit on the shoulders of the Education Minister or the Inspector of Schools. It sits on the shoulders of school leaders and the teams that you lead. So therefore, we need to create the conditions under which you can succeed and school leadership and education can go forward, despite the noise and despite the political headlines, making sure that you can operate every single day. So in NAHT, we talk about three things to achieve that. We talk about growth. The bigger the NAHT can be, the more powerful your voice and the more representative of the sector we can possibly be. And I'm very pleased that since we've been talking about our collective needs and our collective strengths, the membership of the NAHT has grown from something like 27,000 members 3 years ago when I became General Secretary to 31,000 members today, and still growing. And that's because we talk about community and creating professional communities that can rely upon each other and can speak up for one another. And a good example of that I was just talking about with other panelists before I came on is the level of trust that might be being instilled in you as school leaders around predictive grades and the grades that you might award students going forward, and the fact that you might have outstanding cohorts in front of you this year, and yet the grades might be eroded because there's a lack of confidence somehow in your professional judgment. That seems to me not right, and it seems to me that as a professional community we should stand up and be counted for your achievements and your students and pupils' achievements over the past couple of years when they're awarded those grades. So that's the type of community and collective effort that we want to see. And if we're doing that, your voice becomes powerful, and the NAHT's authentic representation of your voice can be taken forward to those with their hands on the levers of power to make the right decisions. And what we've been trying to do in NAHT over the last few years is to make sure that it is a national union, that your staff and your officers in Northern Ireland, for their undoubted efforts and commitment, are supported by the National Union, and for you to know as members in Northern Ireland you have the weight of the union's support behind you. And that really came to bear in the activity that brought to a close the pay and workload agreement recently, with all of that support and the level of support that we were able to bring to your staff and elected officials in Northern Ireland. I'm very proud of what was achieved on behalf of members there through our Northern Ireland office and our Northern Ireland operation, and they should be congratulated for us. So I just really want to end on a couple of things really. I know, and the public should know, that there's nobody more ambitious for the success of the pupils that you look after and the students in your care than you as school leaders. And any political noise around your desire to make sure that schools are safe places needs to be dispelled when people understand that you have that level of ambition. And I know that you want to welcome children back to school as wide and as quickly as you possibly can, but you won't do so unless a safe return can be arranged. And there's no such thing as complete safety in these circumstances, we know that, but we need to acknowledge the risk, we need to understand the size of the risk, so quantify it, and then make sure that the appropriate mitigations are put in place. And that means that as a union, we can't be afraid to ask a difficult question or insist that the right things are put in place. We will ask the difficult questions, but I'm very proud that we have a very good and open working relationship with the Assembly, and in particular with Minister Weir. And I think the fact that Minister Weir is joining us this evening to talk to you through our efforts here really underlines the fact that those conversations aren't always easy, but they're professional and productive conversations to make sure that the very best can be delivered for the children that you look after and the communities that you serve. And we very much look forward to taking that forward over the next few weeks and months to come. So enough from me. You'll want to get into the detail this evening, but just that message of recognition for what it is you do, a message of support from the whole of the NAHT behind the operation in Northern Ireland. And I very much look forward to listening to the rest of the broadcast this evening and the questions and answers to make sure that we can continue to support you in the ways that you need to. So thank you very much for listening to me tonight, Laura. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and we're delighted to have you here tonight and delighted to have the full support of NAHT UK behind us. So thank you for your time this evening. So we will start in a moment. We'll hear from Helena Macormac, Director of NAHT NI, who will introduce the context of why we're here tonight. But first of all, I just want to remind you that if you do want to ask a question to the Minister, you can do so via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And please do look what questions have been asked before, and rather than asking the same or a similar question, we ask you to vote for it with the thumbs up button, because we will look at them in order of popularity. Please do visit the chat box. My colleague Harry Greer is there. He will help you if you have any technical issues, but also please do say hello, let us know where you're watching from tonight. But before we hear from Helena, I'm going to launch the first of our polls tonight. So the first one is a yes or no question. And it is, based on public health advice and current scientific evidence, are you confident that it is safe to open schools? So it's a yes or no question. And I will leave this poll up for while Helena is speaking. But I will now hand over to Helena, and then we will hear from the Minister shortly after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. I'm delighted to welcome you all to tonight's broadcast, and I'm delighted that Minister Weir has been able to join us. I'd like to start tonight by paying recognition to school leaders in Northern Ireland. Your innovation and ingenuity to address pupil need amidst unprecedented circumstances has been exceptional. Your vital work in caring for the children of key workers and vulnerable children has ensured that the NHS and our essential services can function. Your enduring commitment to coordinating high-quality, expert-led distance learning has enabled our children and young people to continue to receive an excellent standard of education. The stability, leadership and oversight that you have provided have ensured that learners have received essential support and guidance amidst these difficult times. All of this cannot be underestimated. Over the past 12 weeks, the NAHT Northern Ireland office has received an exceptionally high volume of member contact. We have received an unprecedented number of emails and phone calls at all times of the day and night. Our executive committee and our branch committees have held numerous meetings to put forward and address concerns across every phase and sector of our membership. In light of the issues you have raised during the pandemic, we have provided dozens of detailed updates and pieces of advice. We have been taking your comments and relaying them back to government. We've produced a comprehensive policy document that contains not only your concerns, but solutions as to how those concerns should be addressed. We have been participating in daily DE dial-ins, we've given evidence to the Education Committee, and we've met with politicians, and we continue to engage with consultation structures on your behalf in light of Minister Weir's School Restart programme. Amidst all of this, we have also negotiated a pay and workload settlement on your behalf that was voted for favourably by a 92.8% majority. We'd like to thank you for the many heartfelt notes of appreciation that we've received in light of this work. We have an excellent team here in Northern Ireland, and furthermore, we have great strength, not only as the largest leadership union in Northern Ireland, but also as part of the largest national union of school leaders. That national perspective has placed us in the ideal position to watch carefully what is happening in respect of other jurisdictions, and this has informed and strengthened our position. Social distancing has been a key concern, and we're pleased to see that today the government in England has announced that they will not force something that cannot be achieved. This is something school leaders have been saying all along, and it underlines why your voice is central to these discussions. As we look to the expansion of provision for greater numbers of pupils in Northern Ireland as we emerge from the height of the pandemic, we know that there are many complex and highly challenging issues to be addressed. The prospects of schools reopening is a positive and necessary development as government seeks to restore public confidence. However, this must be done with the utmost caution. NAHT's position has been clear throughout. Wider access to schools cannot be achieved until it is safe to do so, and the judgment to return must be based on scientific advice. Leaders and parents must have confidence that schools are safe for all pupils and staff. We welcome much of what Minister Weir has laid out in the School Restart programme. Many of the programme principles resonate strongly with what we want, such as the need to be led by evidence and not dates, the need to focus on the well-being of our children and young people, and the need to protect the health of our staff. However, planning a school return is not the same as implementing one. You are the practitioners, you are the experts within your own setting and context, and therefore it is essential that your voices are heard. Your professionalism is respected, and you are given the flexibility and resources to apply measures or guidance appropriately for the pupils in your care. That is why we are delighted to welcome Minister Weir here tonight. This is an opportunity for you to hear from him, but also for him to hear from you. We've already received more questions and comments than we have time for tonight, but I want to reassure you that we will be passing these on to the Minister. There are only a few short weeks left of this term. Many of you have been working without a break since Christmas. You need a break and you need to prioritise your own health and well-being, so we need clarity and we need guidance now. As ever, NAHT are committed to working constructively and robustly with government and to find that clarity to ensure that the next steps are informed and supported and that all measures are in the absolute best interests of children and young people. So with that, I'd like to pass back to Laura to hand over to the Minister.
Thank you very much for that, Helena. So I'm going to be ending the poll now, and we will have a look at the results. So we have 77% voting no to the question based on public health advice and current scientific evidence. Are you confident that it is safe to open schools more widely? 23% saying yes. So thank you very much for everybody who voted in that poll. So as Helena says, we've had some questions in advance. Thank you very much for submitting those. And we've got 39 questions been submitted so far via the Q&A button. So I please ask you to have a look at which questions you would most like to be asked and to vote for them via the thumbs up button. And we will get through as many questions as we can this evening. But as Helena says, we are absolutely delighted to welcome Minister Weir tonight for coming here this evening. And we will, like as Helena said, we will want to hear from him, but also give you an opportunity to feed into. So on that note, I will welcome the Minister to take the floor. He will make a short address for a few minutes and then we'll move on to questions. Thank you very much, Minister Weir. Apologies, just having a problem with the sound.
Is that better now?
That's working now. Thank you very much, Minister.
That's okay. No.
Now I will hand over to Minister Weir.
Thank you. Tonight has been a little bit of a consistent struggle with technology. I think the original links didn't work, so I've had to use a different device in that regard. But I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you tonight and answer questions, and I also give you assurance that you mentioned at this stage 39 questions, which may well grow. And whatever questions we don't get through tonight, if those are forwarded to me, we'll get a response to you as soon as possible in relation to that. Can I say I want to take some time this evening to outline sort of my priorities. I suppose maybe it's most accurate to say for the next phase of education, because it's not a question of restarting education. Education hasn't ceased, and I emphasise I'm aware of the delivery of education that has taken place thanks to the efforts of yourselves and other teachers in doing so. Nor indeed, I suppose, can we strictly say it's reopening of schools, because I'm also aware of a large number of schools that have been providing that facility for key workers and vulnerable children. And again, I thank you for those efforts. Look, there's no doubt that in addition to the remarks I make, I want to hear what you have to say. We are living in very challenging times with many complex issues, and I think we can only deliver that full restart with the input of school leaders. Now, the issues that we're facing in education, indeed in all areas of societies, have never been encountered before. Although now it's almost a cliche, these times are entirely unprecedented. So I want to thank all your members, indeed all school teachers, leaders, and the non-teaching staff for their work to support, and not just the vulnerable children and children of key workers, but also those thousands of pupils who've been educated through remote learning. You've committed yourselves to this task, I think, with dedication and innovation. Hugely complex tasks relating to qualifications, distance learning, and supporting vulnerable children have been completed at pace in a truly collaborative manner. Now, while the response is ongoing, it's important that we begin planning for the next phase and a process of phased reopening of our schools in a safe and effective manner when conditions allow. So therefore, as you indicated, I think Helena indicated, I've emphasised that my priorities for restart are ensuring the physical protection of our workforce and our learners, managing the well-being of our workforce and our learners, protecting vulnerable learners and ensuring the delivery of vital SEN services, focusing on standards and learning in order to maintain or redress educational outcomes, and planning for what, at least for a while, will be the new school day. Now, subject to medical guidance and safety, it would be my aim to see a phased reopening of schools, beginning with a limited provision for key cohorts years in mid-August. Now, I know the detail of this we'll get to probably in questions, followed by phased provision for all pupils at the beginning of September. A key principle of restart planning is the need for collaboration and consultation, as well as the importance of being guided by medical evidence and the best practice from other places where it exists. And indeed, I think, as you've already alluded to, in many ways in Northern Ireland, we can see what has happened elsewhere and we can learn lessons from that. My officials are already working closely with practitioners, trade unions and sectoral bodies, and I hope that the planning is delivered in the spirit of co-design. In addition, the EA Youth Service is beginning engagement with young people to ensure their voice and their concerns are considered as we plan for restart and recovery. Plans to reopen schools must be led by medical and scientific evidence to ensure that this is done in a manner and in a timescale which is safe for our pupils, staff, and indeed for wider society. I've been in regular contact with my counterparts in England, Scotland, Wales, and the Republic of Ireland to share information, discuss our respective approaches to educational provision throughout the pandemic. Now, guidance is currently under development through co-design with practitioners to deal with practical issues on school reopening. Many of these issues will be impacted and influenced by public health guidance, and they'll include issues such as school transport, provision of meals, physical distancing and class sizes, hygiene, physical protection, and workforce management. So I think it's important that schools and settings receive appropriate overarching guidance and parameters for practical arrangements for restart. However, I also appreciate that this is not always a one-size-fits-all for every issue, and that also the professional guidance that school leaders will be able to give will be critical to that local planning to see what needs to be adapted at a local level. You're best placed to know what works best for your school and your young people. So guidance relating to physical protection and new school day planning will be available as soon as possible, and certainly before the end of this current school term. Work on continuity of learning has been ongoing since disruption began in March. My department has developed and implemented a range of resources, training and guidance to help to mitigate, as far as possible, any potential loss to learning pupils may experience as a result of distance and balanced learning. Our schools are well placed to engage in a blended learning approach. Back in 2018, the Chief Inspector's report identified improvements in the use of ICT to support learning, but also identified the need for more teachers to develop their digital skills in order to prepare better their pupils for the increasingly digital society they inhabit. We've had many examples of where schools have made this an area of priority for school improvement within their most recent school development plan. So my department is very mindful that schools must receive sufficient and timely information, support and guidance to allow them to plan for high quality blended learning for the different cohorts of pupils. I've taken a number of steps to address this through the lending of devices which prioritise disadvantaged pupils and vulnerable learners, and ongoing liaison with school principals to identify what additional support is required to optimise continuity of learning. As we move to the recovery phase and the potential of a sustained period of blended learning, a key focus for school leaders and teachers will be to assess learning that has taken place while schools have been closed and identify actions to support individuals or groups or children and young people to redress any loss in learning where progress turns out to be less than expected. And it's important that we also recognise and acknowledge the steps that have been taken already by schools to mitigate against loss of learning. As well as the potential impact on learning, there are risks to physical health, and I'm aware of the potential impact that the disruption is having on the well-being of our workforce and our learners. Recent parent studies have highlighted concerns regarding social isolation and the impact that it's having on our young people. We do not know what the final impact of the current crisis on children's safety, well-being and learning will be, but the longer that children remain out of school, the slower the recovery of lost learning, the loss of peer interaction, disrupted routines, and even shared experiences of key transition points in that education, all of the potential to affect all children and young people, leading to increased anxiety and worry over their future and how to make sense of the world. It's essential that we better understand the impact on well-being and consider appropriate interventions. In addition, the department will will ensure that services to vulnerable and young people, including those with SEN, are reinstated in a safe and effective manner as a matter of priority. Now, I'm under no illusion that the work ahead will be extremely challenging. It's important in doing so that we all work together to address problems and challenges in a collaborative manner. It's essential that we build confidence with the workforce, parents and pupils to allow the reopening of schools, and therefore be guided by colleagues in public health to minimise the risk of transmission in schools. To minimise the risk of transmission in schools and implement appropriate social distancing and hygiene protocols. The impact of well-being and educational standards needs to be understood and managed. We need to work together to ensure the delivery of blended learning is effective and that SEN services can restart in the context of social distancing. I suppose in conclusion, I would like to say that it would be great if I had all the answers. Unfortunately, at this stage, I don't. I'll try and be as open as I can with people, but I'm confident, I think, that between us we can find the solutions to deliver a safe and effective educational restart. This is the biggest public health crisis that any of us have faced in our lifetime, and the Northern Ireland Executive's priority is to help keep people safe and to support those who have faced real hardship. So I would like to thank you for all your support, and I recognise that these have been and will be very challenging times for all of us.
Very much, Minister, for that address, and thank you for talking about some of the detail, but as you alluded to, we will be going into some specifics during the question, but we very much appreciate your intention and your offer to be open with people. Thank you very much for joining us. So we'll start off with questions that came in advance. We have chosen the questions that were asked by most frequently, and we put them together. So, Minister, these questions have two parts as well, so you'll have to bear with us. I'll remind you if need be. So
I feel like I'm doing my A-levels again at this stage.
The first question, which has come in from Kenny Wright, Deirdre O'Kane and Mary Grugan. Will you give a definitive date for when schools are expected to return and for which cohorts? When will guidance be published on this? And when can staff expect to be in schools to prepare?
Okay, well, look, we will be giving greater level of guidance, but in terms of dates, subject to medical advice, because we could always face, I mean, where we are today is not where we were in March, and I suppose there's always the risk that events could overtake us and we could be in a different situation in a couple of months' time. Hopefully we're moving in the right direction. But the intention would be that in the third week of August, that for 3 key cohorts of primary 7, years 12 and 14, which are essentially the GCSE and A-level years, that we would see a restart to teaching then, and then for the more general position of the rest of the years, that we would see a start to return then from the first week in September. As I said, the aim will be where we can get guidance, and we've done this already on a couple of aspects. Obviously, we're trying to balance out that level of discussion, engagement, so that what we get is the best possible guidance that is out there. There will not be any delay in getting any guidance out, and what will probably mean, rather than simply having a single package guidance across every issue. As soon as it is available, we will make it available to schools, and that has already happened with the aim then of ensuring that all of that, as much as possible, is done by the end of this term.
Okay, so by the end of this term, so by June 30th, but
yeah, that would be correct. Yes.
Not you can't give us more of an estimate if it will be sooner than that, or
no, it should be sooner than that, but I'm trying as much as possible to give a guarantee that it will certainly be before June 30th in that regard. Now, is it possible that there could be a particular event happens over the summer which could lead to some level of adjustment in that? That's something which none of us know. So, there's always the possibility of some level of tweaking to it, but the aim would be to have everything there this term, which would give then at least some level of preparation time. Look, I appreciate in an ideal world, all of us would a lot longer. We're all having to respond to events, but that's why, to some extent, rather than, which was maybe a decision taken elsewhere, attempts to try and restart teaching this term, I felt it was important that there was that detailed level of preparation. And there's always a balance to be struck here between, on the one hand, trying to rush out guidance and get it as soon as possible to people, but also then having that level of engagement. And I know that with both the teaching unions and non-teaching unions, there has been throughout this crisis very good engagement. There's also then very specifically as regards the detail of the guidance that the department has been operating and working with participation groups to be able to then get the professional judgment of people as well. So we want to make sure that that it is as good a guidance as possible. I suppose, if you like, the balance therefore is between getting the guidance out and getting it as quickly as possible, but also ensuring that it's as informed as possible, and ensuring that it's informed as possible sometimes can lead to things being a little bit longer than they would take if you were simply being a situation that the department was simply putting out what its own thoughts were.
Okay, I think just to have the appreciation that school leaders and teachers are going to need as longer leading as possible to start making.
No, I understand that.
Then
there'll be no undue delay on our part, and therefore, I think throughout this, teachers, but I would also say, to be fair, my staff within DE, people within EA, I think everybody has been working at full speed, and I think we're quite often, even in terms of some levels of guidance, there would be things under normal circumstances that would be months in gestation, months in pulling together. Sometimes during this crisis have had to be pulled together within a matter of weeks, or sometimes days, or even hours. And I think that's been a challenge, I think, for all of us, my staff included, as well as yourselves.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think just, to have the recognition that principals and teachers have not had a break for several months. So to have the guidance out as long as possible before June 30th.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair comment, yeah.
A good break over summer. And can I just push you about prep time, when you can expect staff to be in school to make these preparations, please?
Well, look, we'll give detailed guidance on that. I don't want to be just giving you a date, essentially, just because, again, there's a bit of ongoing work with some of this stuff. So I don't want to be giving a date and then that may end up being not the exact accurate date and being misleading, but there will be a level of preparation time. I mean, in terms of the overall phasing of things, we are in line. I know England has gone perhaps in a slightly different path, but in terms of timescales, we are in a very similar position to other jurisdictions. So, for example, I think within Scotland, they're talking about an initial return to teaching on the 11th of August. I know from my conversations with Joe McHugh, they're looking at the 4th week in August. So we're kind of pitched in between there in terms of those key cohort years. But there will be that level of preparation. But preparation may not be the same for everyone, because I suppose it depends as well also whether you're doing preparation work for key cohorts or just more generally on that basis.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll move on to the second question, which came in from Cara Dixon, Susan Hawhey, Diane Dawson, Stephen Orr and Katrina Crilly. That is, there are a number of obstacles for staff return to schools. These include childcare arrangements, staff health issues, contractual hours. How will you resolve these issues, and will staff return be voluntary? Well,
what I would say on the basis of, we'll be resolving these by way of working with our trade union colleagues on a range. I mean, a lot where we can get on health and safety issues, we'll be drawing very much from the evidence advice of public health agency. I've had meetings with, for example, chief medical officer and chief scientific officer to try to ensure that what information we get is the best possible in relation to that. Some of the contractual issues will be work that will be ongoing with the trade unions to ensure then that nobody is in any way disadvantaged as a result of that. In terms of voluntary side of things, you know, where, for instance, somebody has a particular health issue where they cannot work, I think that's one thing. In terms of as a workforce, will people be returning? Yes, people in general will be returning. It's not a question of you decide to work or you don't decide to work in that regard. Clearly, if somebody, for instance, has to shield, and there will be revised advice that is happening in different jurisdictions as regards that, then that obviously clearly will be honoured as part of that. If somebody is off sick, clearly the normal arrangements will take place in terms of substitution cover. But in general, the workforce will be returning.
Thank you, Minister. So just to push on that point, if staff are building, can you hear me okay?
Sorry, yes, sorry, just give me 1 second here. Hold on, give me a second, sorry. That's okay, just to go down there, I'm just on a... Sorry, just I'm telling. Sorry, I'm trying to sort of multitask with carers here in relation to that as well. Sorry, go ahead. Start again. Sorry, that's what.
Specifically on the shielding point versus who are vulnerable. So if people are shielding and have had a letter saying they're shielding, they won't be compelled to return to work. But people.
No, more accurately, they will not be working from school. If someone is shielding, the same way with anybody else in the public sector, they will still be working. If somebody is ill, they don't work. But this will be part of the overall process. I mean, look, and this will be incredibly challenging, I know, for schools, but the balance will have to be struck within schools, as with any other workforce, where some work can, for those who are not physically going to be in class, and if they're told that they are not to be in work, that will be honoured, but there will still be work to be done in the same way as anybody else, and the same way as people who've been shielding at present are still doing that level of work in terms of remote learning. And that may well mean that, particularly within schools, if we're looking at a blended approach, that might mean, and I appreciate this will be very challenging, that we look at where the division of responsibilities and work is, and those who are able to work but are not physically prevented, if you like, because of their conditions from going into school. There will be, I think, a level of balancing that they would take on probably greater level of responsibility in terms of some of the remote learning as opposed to those who are directly in class. So it's about working through that, and that will be on the individual circumstances of schools. Clearly, if somebody is sick, then the normal rules about getting substitution cover in, or indeed if because of the nature of employment, which quite often will go beyond the teaching profession, that it is something that under normal circumstances somebody would be physically required to be in and cannot deliver their particular bit of work, again, that substitution will clearly be permitted.
But specifically about people who are vulnerable rather than those who are shielding, so haven't had the letter saying they're going to shield, the people who have a vulnerable condition, will they be compelled to?
Well, if they're not being instructed by public health and indeed through the process to shield, then they'll normally be expected to be in work. The same with everybody in that regard. I mean, the issues regarding shielding, there was I think it's been acknowledged both in the UK generally, but in Northern Ireland, that the initial position on shielding was a very widely drawn blanket approach that was very precautionary in nature. I think that it's been acknowledged from the Chief Medical Officer, both in Northern Ireland and in a wider context, that there will be work ongoing, and the people will clearly be getting will be getting further information in terms of letters. It may well be that there will be then adjustments to those who are shielding and those that aren't. But clearly, if somebody isn't required to shield, then the normal reality is that they will be in work.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think some guidance specifically around those who are vulnerable.
Yeah, no, I think that's critical, because look, I know as well. I'm also conscious of the fact that we need to give very clear guidance in that, particularly from a medical point of view. In part because I suppose, and particularly looking at your own members, at the position in terms of head teachers, if that isn't given, that will leave them in a very difficult position themselves, because you know, I can appreciate it would be extremely awkward for them to have to make approaches to try to find out, if you like, if a particular member of staff is able to come in or they're not. trying to, if you like, take their word for it or not. So that level of clear guidance will be given and clear procedures will be put in place in terms of the broader issue of return to work for staff.
Can staff now come into school to prepare though? So particularly those who are vulnerable, who might need the extra precautions in terms of social distancing, can you allow staff to come into schools?
Well, there isn't ultimately, I think within any school at present, I don't think there's any actual bar on any staff coming in. And I know at times there have maybe been, albeit a small number of staff, there have been a number of teachers who, in terms of what they're doing, have maybe wanted to use the school as a route to do that. And there's no particular problem in anybody using facilities, trying to make sure then that on that basis. And I think it's about making arrangements, central arrangements within schools. In most cases, I think a lot of the preparation work can be done from home, but I'm certainly not putting up any particular barrier to that. And the nature, I suspect, of the numbers will be such that if you're talking about an environment in which the only people potentially are a small number of adults, then the issue of social distancing, I think, is something that's relatively easily to be handled.
And very briefly, Minister, can you just comment on those who have childcare arrangements that might?
Well, specifically, there is an ongoing discussion that the Northern Ireland Executive will have on childcare. I think it is important that at the moment there has been a level of childcare provision that has been made for key workers. Obviously, that the teachers remain key workers. There was a problem, I think, that in terms of the definition of key workers, the Department of Health had a much narrower definition. That has now been solved. But look, I think there's a wider issue that will need to be embraced and need to be discussed at the Northern Ireland Executive in terms of childcare. And we're kind of a situation that across various sectors of society, that a lack of childcare becomes a barrier for people being able to sort of return to work. And I think that will be a wider discussion than simply what will happen within the Department of Education. It will have to be taken by the Northern Ireland Executive, in particular. Clear decisions need to be made in connection with that.
So just to recognise that teachers and school leaders are key workers.
Yes.
Potentially to look at if there is the opportunity for children to come into schools where the teachers and principals work, but I think to have some specific guidance around that, because there's lots of education professionals, particularly those with children who are not of school age, about what should happen to them when they are required to be back in school. No,
look, that will be essential that is in place before we see resumption of schools.
Thank you very much, Minister Weir. So I'm going to move on to the next question, and I'm going to try and speed up a little bit because we've not got through that many questions, and we have 85 answered. So very brief.
It's probably an occupational hazard, certainly on my part, I have to say. So I'll confess my part in the guilt in that as well.
So the next question is from Leah McGuckin, Stephen Orr and Sinead Hoy. Much of our school estate is not equipped to facilitate social distancing, especially with regard to younger children and those who may struggle with the concept. How would you address this?
Well, look, we'll be giving clear guidance in terms of social distancing on the basis of what the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Scientific Advisor say. I would say, particularly as regards younger children, the key point is probably ensuring that we have appropriate interaction between the children and adults. Look, I think it's undoubtedly the case that if you're dealing with very young children, their ability to socially distance from each other will be limited. What I would say is it's fairly clear that any of the scientific evidence would certainly suggest, in terms of any potential threat to children, that is extremely low, that there is a level of indication that, for example, even transmission amongst much younger children tends to be at a much lower level. But it is about, I suppose, particularly ensuring that where there will be that level of interaction between children and adults, that is safe, because it's generally speaking the adults who will be in are more likely to be in a vulnerable category than the children.
Okay, thank you. So I think, again, just reiterating the feedback that the guidance needs to address schools that may have issues with the physical layout of the building, the number of classrooms within the school. And just
I mean, look, I appreciate as well the school estate in Northern Ireland is one of the things that will be looked at. Will reflect actually the fact that different schools have even just different sizes of classrooms, that while a lot of, shall we say, more modern schools in terms of their in terms of more modern builds will have DE specifications in terms of the size of their classrooms, particularly for a lot of the older estate. That will be of a different level on it, and I suppose the expectations in terms of numbers will clearly be dependent upon the size of the classroom, and obviously there'll be there's got to be a level of flexibility for people to, well, this is where the balance is to be struck. Very clear guidance needs to be given, but also there's a wee bit of sort of common sense approach has got to be applied and given the opportunity for that little bit of flexibility, particularly for school leaders who will know what's there on the ground. So that mixture between guidance and flexibility, it will be a difficult thing to hit the right spot on, but I think that will have to be a balance struck there.
Thank you very much. And also I think a key concern is for the availability of computers and iPads at home for pupils, but also the availability and the reliability of internet as well. So I think when we're going forward with the blended learning approach.
Yeah, no, I mean, what we have done in terms of the digital devices, there has been initially sort of a level of trawl within schools. There's also been a situation where EA on digital devices have, prior to the COVID bit, have procured, I think, another 3,000. We've given indications of, in terms of, because there will be some delays even in terms of some of the capital build, that we're going to be shifting a certain amount of capital money to ensure that they're up to, including across the board, maybe around about 24,000 devices. From the initial trawl in terms of what is needed, it will probably be considerably less than that will be needed, but there won't be a shortage of that. Where we do have a problem is that while most of Northern Ireland is in fairly good position in terms of internet access, there will be patches in Northern Ireland which there will be difficulty in dealing with, that there isn't that proper broadband level of connection and won't be for the foreseeable time, in which case then there will need to be sometimes alternative methods used, and sometimes that will mean particular sort of paper copies of things will need to be used, because with the best will in the world you could have a house packed with digital devices. If it's not having a particular internet connection because of poor broadband, I think, you know, we just need to get practical solutions to overcome that.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Next question is from Leah Mulligan and Paul McLean. What consideration is being given to the impact on learners in post-primary schools from the lack of face-to-face teaching, lack of practical lessons, and the possible 2-year disruption to the programme of study for key exam cohorts?
Well, there's a couple of things I would say in relation to that. A very good question. Look, we're looking and going to put a package together to the executive to see what additional assistance can be given. I mean, we're all operating under very limited budgets, but what additional assistance can be given to learner cohorts, and indeed for that level of capture of learning. And there are various ideas. Now, I probably can't go into detail at the moment because it's still something that's got to go to the executive. We've got to have first examination. I think the other key element of this, and this will be something that apply not just in Northern Ireland, but in other jurisdictions as well. I know that, for instance, this morning there was discussion between some of the post-primary principals and CCEA. And I think that there's a broader level to acceptance that in terms of where the curriculum is pitched at, because of the difficulties that are there, and because whatever good work is done in terms of remote learning, it cannot be as good as that delivery within the classroom, that there will need to be certain level of dialing down of public expectations of where we are, and indeed a dialing down a little bit of the curriculum. And I think that's something which will be recognised not just in Northern Ireland, but across the UK. And I think that will have impact, for example, where public examinations will be taking place, as to the level and the level of difficulty that can be pitched at. We do have one of the both difficulties, but at least level playing fields of this pandemic is it is applying everywhere. So I think that some of the adjustments that will need to be made will not just be in Northern Ireland, but I think through that coordination, be it through Ofqual or others, to ensure that we have a relatively level playing field across neighbouring jurisdictions. Thank
you, Minister. I'm going to move on now to questions that have come in this evening from contributors. I'm going to ask you to be as brief as possible in your response.
Okay.
Some of them could even be yes or no answers.
Okay, yes.
Try and give some practical specifics, because I think that's the big gap for people at the moment, is they don't know, and I appreciate you've not got the guidance yet, but I think as much as possible, if you can give us some specifics, that it would be very much appreciated. So Lynn Knocker asks, will there be financial support provided to schools to allow them to purchase necessary equipment to implement social distancing and infection control?
Well, I think in terms of infection control, we're looking at what the best methods for that. Across the system, I think there will be some things that will be supplied by EA, and we're looking where possible to, in terms of certain things, to be able to capitalise some of those things. So particularly around hygiene, I think will be critical.
Will you give financial support to schools to be able to afford?
Well, you know, one way or the other things will be paid for. The only complication we're running into, generally speaking, and this is something again not just confined to Northern Ireland. Look, we're all operating under a level of limited budget. It's not like we have a large pool of money that's sitting there in Department of Education. Some of this will be, you know, what will be needed. Sometimes in terms of things will need to be relatively inventive. I think the problem that across the public sector, we're finding the additional costs of COVID compared to what we have, we could be spending the same budget 2 or 3 times over if we're to meet every need. So some of this will be a level of support. Some will be where collectively we're all going to have to be fairly inventive. And you know, I can't ultimately conjure up money which isn't there.
I think there's if you just have a recognition that there are going to be additional costs.
Oh, no, undoubtedly, and those will need to be met. But it may well be that certain things, again, as we look on this, there may well be certain things that it's best that actually, for instance, are procured centrally and been able to get out. You may be able to get the best possible deals on those things. So, you know, all those things will be looked at.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I'm going to ask you now, again, if you can be as brief as possible so we can get through as many. We've got 97 questions, which we won't get to. I'd like to ask a couple more. Are key workers still key workers in September? And if so, do their children get to come into school every day as they are doing so now? And that's from Diane Boyle.
No, I think the idea is that every child would have some time in the classroom. I don't think we would, in terms of the pure classroom, but we would differentiate between those who would be key workers in September and those that are not. There's not, in that sense, going to be either advantage or disadvantage to any individual child.
But say potentially if rotas were needed to be employed come September because of the social distancing guideline, medical advice.
Well, it wouldn't be a question of here are some children who are going to be in, say, who are in the same classroom 5 days a week, and here's some who are going to be in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days a week. The idea would be that we want to ensure that as much as possible in terms of that classroom learning, that children are treated equally.
Is rota something that you would consider in allowing the guidance if schools physically can't fit all their children in at the same time?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, if we reach, depending upon precisely where we reach, the idea of blended learning may well be, and there are different ideas of how this could be done, but it may well be that children are in for a certain number of days, I think the way that's probably likely to be done would be on a percentage of the class being in. You know, now some of this will vary according to, as you've indicated, the physical specifications, and it may well be that whatever is able to be done may not be exactly the same between different schools. But yes, rotas could well be part of the solution to that.
Can I ask you about children of key workers over the summer in July and August, and how schools are expected to manage children coming in on the 17th of August? That's from Michael Keenan.
Well, broadly speaking, on the 17th of August, there will be particular cohorts there, and it will be effectively, I suppose, whatever provisions are put in place to prepare for that will be done. In terms of over the summer, I think there's a realization that I think from the point of view of teachers and schools, that there does need to be a break. And so therefore, whereas we're looking to see if there's any other different levels of support could be given to children of key workers from outside the mainstream school system, the aim would be then really that the school term will come to an end on the 30th of June. Now, I know that there may well be some schools who will take particular activity that they may want to do for some of their pupils over the summer, in which case that will certainly be permitted. But on the basis of will the normal school year end at the end of this term, yes, it will.
Thank you, Minister. I think you should be able to give a yes/no answer to this one. It's from Sharon Cassidy. Can the Minister /DE/EA communicate with parents regarding blended learning and partial school placements? A lot of angry parents blaming school and high expectations of full-time provision.
Yeah, we can communicate with parents.
Thank you. Can we ask about the 17th of August specifically? Is this going to be mandatory for schools, or is there going to be some flexibility around it? And I think there's some particular concerns from members and from the education community about people who may have holidays booked during that time. Are they going to be expected to cancel? Will there be some compensation if they do have to cancel? If you can give us some specifics on...
Well, no, I think the aim will be for it to have every school open at that stage, in the same way I think it's the same position in other jurisdictions as well. I'm not quite sure at the moment where anybody's particularly going to be going on holiday on the 17th of August, but you know, I think, look, given the fact as well though that there will be it will mean that also by the same token, if we're only looking at particular cohorts of children rather than across the board, I think there can be a little bit of flexibility that schools can use in terms of their own staffing arrangements as regards that. It will not, you know, not everybody clearly by definition will be teaching on the 17th of August.
But I think just specifically if, you know, if people do have holidays that they can take, or even if they don't have holidays, but if they do have that time booked.
Well, look, I'm sure, look, individual circumstances can be looked at, but the point I'm making, I suppose, to some extent is, if you're talking, for instance, on a primary school setting, we're talking about 1 year in 7, and I think I'm sure that there can be a little of ingenuity to work around any of those situations if there's individual circumstances.
So I think there's if you could have a recognition that a lot of what has been happening over the last few months and the success of it has relied on the goodwill of staff in schools, and of
no, absolutely, yes.
It's just to, you know, realise that people have this time but with the families and might need to take it.
No, look, I understand that, but I mean, look, I think there can be enough flexibility in arrangements that we could be able to cope with that, and I think there will be, in terms of all the contractual obligations, obviously there will be work that will have to be done then directly speaking between the department and between particularly the trade union representatives of all the unions to work through the I suppose some of the procedures that will need to be taking place to ensure that contracts are honoured. So
if staff have holiday booked, just to get your specific answer on this, you're not going to be asking staff to cancel holidays in the last 2 weeks of August?
Well, I'm not, you know, I have to say, look, I think there's flexibility can be operated within any school to be able to cover that. I'm not sure, given current circumstances, realistically, whether there's going to be too many people will have holidays booked for the 17th for August, and they expect them to go ahead. I mean, I don't think there's going to be, for example, outside of what is available very locally, I can't see many people being able to jet away in current circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. And just one final question for you, which is from Carwin Guy. With the benefit of hindsight, is there anything you would do differently in education in response to the problems caused by the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, look, you know, I'm not quite sure if that's the Columbo-like question, which I'm now going to confess to having committed the murder at the beginning of the episode. But look, I think there will be time, I think all of us can reflect. And I think if we all have the advantage of hindsight in life, there's probably things we could all do differently in that regard. I think that all things you ultimately react on the basis of what knowledge is there at present. I think that's true of all of us. I am sure that when all this is over, we'll all sit back as individuals and work out whether there's anything different any of us could have done. But I think for all of us, you know, whether it's as a minister, whether it's a member of staff at DE, whether it's as a school teacher, I think all of us have tried to call it as best we see it. And I think that's all ultimately in life any of us can do. Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much for your time this evening. Okay, thank you. From taking some tough questions from the audience. And as I said, look, if there's the other questions, I appreciate we didn't get through all 97. So if you want to forward those on to the department, we'll try and get you answers as best we can to those. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. And like I say, we will feed those questions in so you do get a flavour of the issues that are affecting school leaders. So thank you very much to the Minister for joining, and thank you everybody for submitting the questions and feeding in that way. We are now going to run a short poll again, and while this poll is running, we will be hearing from Geri. So I will launch the poll first of all. The question is, do your staff have access to sufficient number of high quality, secure IT devices to support and sustain blended learning in the longer term? So that's another yes or no question. And while you're voting on that, I will invite Geri Cameron, who is President of NAHT NI, to respond to the Minister's remarks. Thank you very much. Sorry, Geri, can you try and unmute?
There you go.
Thank you.
Sorry, I thought you were doing that for me, Laura. Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you, Geri.
Sorry, Laura, I thought you did everything for us. My apologies. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be sitting here this evening, talking to so many people that have taken the time to sign in this evening. First of all, I want to thank the Minister for taking the time to speak to us all this evening. I have no doubt that he is one of the busiest men in Northern Ireland at the moment, so we do appreciate him taking the time to answer some fairly probing questions on all our behalf for this evening, and also for his opening remarks. I will, however, you would expect me to say that we, as the people at the chalk face, would expect to have had a little bit more detail. It has. I know that that's a challenge for the Minister, and I do appreciate that and I acknowledge it. But one of the things that I would like to say to him is that everything that the Minister and his office dream up, we have to put into practice. We have to actually make these things happen in the classrooms and in our schools going forward, and that is a huge challenge, as all of us know. We need, I suppose whenever, I wasn't in the privileged position of being able to write a speech for this because I'm responding to the Minister, so apologies if this is a little bit off the cuff, but and there's a weird place that the camera is on an iPad. Those of you on iPad, so if I will occasionally find the right spot and look straight at you, but apologies if I'm not. But I wrote down some things as the Minister was speaking. It's great that the Minister acknowledges the work that school leaders have put into the last 3 months. It has been phenomenal. And look, there is no doubting that if we hadn't put that work in, along with our staff, teaching and non-teaching, and all the support workers that we need in our school every single day, it simply wouldn't have been possible to mitigate against the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on our learners. And the Minister talked about protecting the continuity of learning. We have actually enacted that. However, we are all absolutely exhausted, and what we need more than anything right now is we need dates, we need guidance, and we need firm guidance that is not going to be voluntary in some aspects, will set schools against each other because one school is able to do more than the other because their geography is better, their estate is better. We need something very unequivocal and something that is unambiguous and something that we can use above all to give our parents back the trust and confidence they need to send their children back to school. That is the key. That's what we need the Minister and his office to give us as soon as possible. By the end of June is too late. The next we need on my list is we all need a break, and we need a guilt-free summer break so that we can recuperate from what has been this most shocking term ever in all of our careers, and prepare probably for the next most shocking term in all of our careers. So, you know, we need to be able to say on the 30th of June that we have done as much as we can do in terms of prepping for whatever date we are going to be given, and it looks very much like the 17th of August. We also need resources. I don't think it's reasonable to say that the estate just can't support it, or that the country just can't support it, and the head teachers have to be innovative and creative. What are we going to be innovative and creative with? We're already in deficit, so we will need some resources. And we also need to address the fact that many of our teachers are using their own resources, their own IT devices to support blended learning, which was an emergency response, but we now need to anticipate that that might last for maybe as long as a year going forward. And is it fair that we're just landing that on teachers now? And we as school leaders will have to negotiate that with our staff. So we need the resource to be able to do it. Ultimately, we all need to know that we're in this together and that it is a collaboration and that everyone is moving and pushing in the same direction and that there aren't any tensions. So I would just ask everyone, the Minister and everyone who can influence outside of the education workforce to acknowledge that we need to be focused and funneled on making the COVID-19 2020 year a memory for children, not a millstone around their necks for children. Thank you.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Geri, for those comments. So I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you to all those that have voted. I'll be sharing the results for you. So the question was, do your staff have access to a sufficient number of high quality, secure IT devices to support and sustain blended learning in the longer term? 73% saying no, with only 27% saying yes. So thank you very much for taking part in that poll, everybody. So we're coming to the end of the broadcast now. So it was great to hear from Geri, who is one principal, and we're now moving on to Graham, who is the Vice President of NAHT NI, and as we said earlier, a principal in County Armagh, and he will just give us a final few remarks and summation from this evening. Thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you, Laura. Although the context is extremely challenging, it is a great encouragement to me to see the engagement of our school leaders this evening. You are here because you want to do the best for the children in your schools, for your staff and for your communities which you serve so well. I feel so encouraged by the sincere commitment and outstanding leadership that you have shown throughout this crisis. And I believe that because of the quality of the school leaders in Northern Ireland, we are in the best possible situation to consider the outworkings of this pandemic for the new term. The questions raised this evening demonstrate the level of anxiety and uncertainty which exists amongst our principals. It is certainly the case that it is the principals who stand on the parapet seeking to balance the expectations and needs of our communities, the pastoral needs of our staff, the logistical demands of the new school day, the pedagogical implications of remote learning, the many unknown issues around safety and hygiene, the many complex pastoral needs of our children and the requirements of the Department of Education. It is certainly a challenging time. And of course, this crisis landed at a time when we were already stretched beyond what could ever be considered reasonable, having endured a decade of decimated school budgets, many years of industrial action, our own trade dispute targeted as it was to address issues directly affecting our capacity to deliver for children, and significantly diminished levels of professional service and support and empathy from various bodies. The role of a school leader is not for the faint-hearted, but that is okay, for we are not faint-hearted. We have demonstrated the strength and resilience and capacity to rise to meet challenge after challenge. We have been justifiably resolute, stubborn and tenacious because we take seriously our commitment to the children. Minister Weir, thank you for your participation this evening. None of us is under any illusion as to the immensity of responsibility that sits on your shoulders. So be assured that you have in the membership of NAHT a committed, caring, solution-focused and powerful body of school leaders who want above all things the best for our children. Minister Weir, I say to you that the majority of school leaders in Northern Ireland are represented by NAHT, nursery, primary, post-primary and special, controlled, integrated, Irish medium, maintained and private. We represent the educational and pastoral experiences and needs of 250,000 children across schools in Northern Ireland. So we welcome your participation, but we need your genuine consultation with us as we seek to navigate our way through this crisis together. We need to work with each other, not against each other. And so for the sake of our children, I encourage you to continue high levels of genuine, clear, collaborative engagement with NAHT. We are focused on finding solutions. And to NAHT members, I say to you, you have a powerful professional body in this organization. And as an individual school leader, you have excellent sectoral channels to feed into and benefit directly from. The local branches of special nursery, primary and post-primary feed directly into the Northern Ireland Executive Committee, which in turn feeds directly into the National Executive. And I encourage you to become increasingly involved in the collective strength of this organization. And to non-members, I say to you, NAHT has seen unprecedented growth in the last number of months and is indeed the fastest growing organisation of school leaders in this region. Your voice, as someone in leadership in education, pursuing the interests of school leadership as a means of achieving the best outcomes and experiences for our children, is vitally important and should be heard. NAHT exists for you and for your children. NAHT exists for leaders and for learners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham, for those words. And thank you very much to all our panellists tonight, to Graham, to Geri, to Helena, and also to Paul Whiteman from NAHT UK for joining us this evening, and of course to Minister Weir for giving us so much of his time tonight. We thank you for engaging with us, and as we said earlier, we will be passing on the frequently asked questions, the questions at the bottom, the 106 questions or 108 that have been submitted. We will make sure that Minister Weir has them going forward and use as a basis for any guidance that comes out, and NAHT will be pushing for that to be as soon as possible. So thank you very much for joining us. We are going to be posting some links now, hopefully, so you'll be able to see how you can access our specialist advice team if you do need any support with particular queries in your school. We also have frequently asked questions which are regularly updated, and we will be feeding through these unanswered questions to the Minister. Be able to watch a replay of tonight. That will be available on the NAHT website tomorrow, and we will tweet from @NAHT NI News with details of where you can find this link, so please do look out for that, #NI COVID School Response. There will be future briefings, especially for Northern Ireland, and our members in Northern Ireland are very welcome to join the UK-wide briefings that we do offer as well. But a call to action really. For people, if you're not a member of a union, do join a union. We hope that it would be NAHT, but we support our sister unions as well, so if that is more appropriate for you to join, then please do join that. But I think we've seen in this crisis over the last few months the importance of being part of a collective and being part of a union in terms of negotiations, so please do join a union. And if you are an NAHT member and you would like to get more involved in NAHT, then we would very much welcome that. Don't just be a leader in your school, be a leader in your union and be a leader in your community going forward. We are very pleased to have had nearly 500 people joining us tonight. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you at another broadcast shortly sometime soon. Thank you. Good night.